Fairfield, Illinois, July 3rd, 2014. It's a little after 11 p.m. Young mother Kathy Jo Hutchcraft just arrived home. She plans to relax a bit and makes herself a quick meal after a long and busy day. While she waits for her ramen to cook, she suddenly feels a wave of fear, as if something is very wrong. She just knows she must check on her 15-year-old daughter Megan, who is supposed to be asleep. To her horror, Kathy Jo finds Megan's bed empty. Panicking, Kathy Jo searches the rest of the house but finds no sign of Megan. Desperate, she calls and texts her daughter, but there's no response. The day had started off normally. Megan went for a bike ride in the afternoon, and later she and Kathy Jo helped a friend settle into their new home. Megan was her usual bubbly self, joking around and having fun. However, around 9 p.m., Megan said she did not feel well and complained of a stomachache. Kathy Jo takes her home to rest. After hugging and exchanging "I love yous," Kathy Jo returned to her friend's house to finish helping. When Kathy Jo returns to an empty house later that night and Megan doesn't answer her phone, panic sets in. Extremely worried, Kathy Jo calls her mother, and the two women drive to the Fairfield police station to report Megan missing. The police, however, are not concerned at all. They tell Kathy Jo that teenagers often run away and that Megan will likely turn up soon enough. They also mention that it's too early to file a missing person report, which is not the case. Please, if you ever find yourself in this situation, demand the report to be made. Back at home, Kathy Jo and her mother search Megan's room for clues. When Kathy Jo pulls back the blanket on the bed, she finds Megan's phone. An extremely alarming discovery. Like most people, Megan would never leave without her phone. And, even more concerning, the phone had been reset to factory settings and was completely wiped. Devastated, the two women kneel and start praying. It's then that Kathy Jo's mother spots an envelope addressed to Mom. In the note, Megan writes that she loves her mom but feels she will never be happy in their small town. She asks Kathy Jo not to look for her, saying it would be a waste of time to spend a lifetime searching for someone who doesn't want to be found. Kathy Jo recognizes Megan's handwriting but feels the note doesn't sound like her daughter. She knows Megan extremely well. They are very close and share a tight bond. Having had Megan at a young age and living with just the two of them for most of Megan's life made them a tight unit. They like to do the same things and do almost everything together. Later on, in interviews, Kathy Jo would say about the note, quote, "This does not sound like my daughter at all. To me, this is borderline cruel. Knowing my daughter like I know my daughter, if those were going to be her last words to me, it would not have been those words." Unquote. Kathy Jo believes the note was not written out of free will. She finds it suspicious that Megan left her phone and chose to write a letter instead of sending a text. Which teenager writes a letter these days? They live their whole lives on their phones. Although she considers that Megan might have left her phone to avoid being tracked by the police, the letter still feels off to her. During the next few hours, Kathy Jo frantically calls friends and family. But nobody knows where Megan is. One friend suggests to check Megan's bank account. When she does, Kathy Jo discovers that Megan made a withdrawal of $200 on the afternoon of July 3rd. At the time that Megan had been out for her bike ride. The next day, or actually later that morning, because of course the family hasn't slept, they return to the police station with Megan's note, the wiped phone, and the information about the withdrawal. This time, the police do take action. They collect footage from the bank's surveillance cameras and the ATM. Megan is seen on video outside the bank and while withdrawing money. As the investigation unfolds, the police quickly find a promising lead. Shockingly, it is Megan's biological father, Jackson Nichols. Jackson lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He and Kathy Jo divorced when Megan was just a baby, and he had been absent from Megan's life until very recently, after she had reached out to him. They had met in person, and Megan had forgiven her father for his absence. Jackson's sex offender registration was quickly discovered and triggered the attention of the police. However, it was also possible, of course, that Megan really wanted to leave small-town Fairfield and start a new life with her dad. In any case, two good reasons to question Jackson. His sexual assault charge dates back to 1997 when he was 18 years old and was dating a 14-year-old girl. When the girl's mom finds out, she called the police. Jackson was charged with 2 counts of nonviolent sexual assault. Fast forward about 10 years, and Jackson was in for a surprise during a routine traffic stop. He was registered as a sex offender. It all turned out to be a clerical error, though. Jackson went to court, where his case was dismissed in 5 minutes. Unfortunately, the dismissal paperwork never made it from Illinois to Oklahoma. So, now that Megan disappeared and police investigated her father, alarm bells went off and a warrant was issued immediately. Due to another clerical error, Jackson spent a month in Tulsa County Jail before he was released and cleared as a suspect in his daughter's murder case. In the next clip, we see a devastated Jackson trying to explain his feelings. A broken man, held in jail on suspicion of having harmed his own flesh and blood. Even if he didn't speak, the images make the devastation loud and clear.
I didn't know that I could be this angry or this sad. It's I'm at a loss for words.
Kathy Jo never saw her ex-husband as a viable suspect. She had her own suspicions. Megan's 18-year-old ex-boyfriend, Brody Merbarger. To understand Kathy Jo's strong suspicions against Brody, we have to go a little bit back in time. As mentioned earlier, Megan and Kathy Jo lived with just the 2 of them most of Megan's life. They were later joined by Kathy Jo's partner, Jared. There is not much information available about Jared and the relationship between him and Megan. But he is mentioned as one of Megan's parents in her obituary, and judging from the photos, it all seemed to be fine. They look like a normal, happy family. Megan was a sophomore at Fairfield Community High School in Fairfield, a small town in southern Illinois with about 5,000 residents at the time. It is the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, a tight-knit community. The town's motto is, the home of friendly people. Megan was a happy, joyful girl, described by friends and family as upbeat, energetic, and outgoing, and she was always joking around. Guaranteed to make you laugh. She was a good student and took part in many school activities. She was a cheerleader, played volleyball, softball, and loved singing and making music. Megan was always singing. Kathy Jo fondly recalled how much she loved to hear Megan sing and play her ukulele. Megan was well-behaved and an avid churchgoer too. Megan and Brody had known each other since they were young children. They reconnected in 8th grade and grew closer in high school, where both joined the Glee Club. Brody is described as a kind, smart guy, and he too is very musically talented. They started dating at the homecoming dance in 2013. Both had come with different dates, Megan with a boy from church and Brody with his girlfriend Kendra. But they quickly ditched their dates and only had eyes for each other, dancing closely. Well, according to friends, it was quite a show. Megan's date left and went home, and Kendra burst into tears. From that moment on, Megan and Brody were inseparable. However, Brody soon went back to Kendra, but continued seeing Megan as well. Despite all being in Glee Club together, apparently Megan and Kendra both thought to be Brody's one and only. Or maybe they both did know, but were too smitten to leave him. Kyle Ellis, Brody's best friend at the time, recalls that Brody would even brag about leading the 2 girls on. When prom came around, Brody chose Kendra as his date, telling Megan that it would have been his mom's wish. Brody's mom, Jennifer, had recently passed away in a tragic accident. She had driven her car into the backwaters of a river and stranded in floodwaters. Her car was found abandoned. Jennifer was eventually found, under the ice. Sadly, she could not be saved and died of hypothermia. Megan must have been heartbroken about Brody's choice, but, blinded by her love for him, she accepted the situation. She even tried to defend his actions to her mom, but Kathy Jo didn't buy it. In fact, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Kathy Jo had never been happy with Megan and Brody's relationship. She had forbidden Megan from seeing him, setting a rule that there would be no dating before Megan turned 16. The significant age gap between Megan and Brody was another concern. Kathy Jo felt a 2.5-year difference was too much at their ages. More importantly, she believed Brody didn't treat Megan right, especially when she found out that Brody was seeing another girl at the same time. Determined to end the relationship, Kathy Jo took Megan's phone away, hoping to stop their communication. But Megan, being tech-savvy, found another way to text Brody. Kathy Jo discovered this when she checked Megan's phone and saw a real-time conversation. She confronted Megan and demanded the other device, but Megan would not give it up. In the messages, Megan expressed her frustration with her mom, saying she could not stand her and talked about running away. Although Kathy Jo could only see Megan's side of the conversation, the police later retrieved Brody's messages, which showed he was in fact encouraging Megan and said he wished they could leave together. It was clear they were still in a relationship. Kathy Jo stood firm this time, telling both Megan and Brody that it was over. But it wasn't over. A short while later, Brody shows up at Kathy Jo's door and she lets him in. He accuses Kathy Jo of being too controlling and suggests she should be on medication, arguing that she can't make decisions for Megan. Flabbergasted, Kathy Jo responds that, as Megan's mother, she not only has the right, but also the responsibility to make such decisions. She tells Brody to leave, but he refuses, continuing the argument and claiming Megan tells him everything that goes on between them. Kathy Jo repeatedly tells him to leave, but he insists he's not going anywhere. Finally, after her last demand, Brody retreats, but very slowly, making Kathy Jo feel like he was trying to show her that he was in control. Despite this confrontation, Brody and Megan continue to stay in touch. On the night of Memorial Day 2014, May 26th, Kathy Jo wakes up and checks on Megan, as she usually does, as most parents do. Much like what would happen later on July 3rd, she finds Megan's bedroom empty, with her phone left behind. This time, the phone isn't wiped, and Kathy Jo goes through the text history. The last conversation is with one of Megan's female friends. Kathy Jo calls the friend, but it's Brody who answers. She immediately calls the police to report her daughter missing. Police come to the house, but while they are there, Megan arrives home. It is unclear what exactly happens after this night, but at some point, friends and family believe that Brody and Megan finally broke up. They notice a significant change in Megan. She becomes a shell of her former self, angry, depressed, and secretive. She even drops out of Glee Club. Meanwhile, Brody seems to move on and continues his relationship with Kendra. Based on the intense teenage drama that had been unfolding in the previous months, Kathy Jo immediately suspects Brody to be involved in Megan's disappearance. Her suspicions were so strong that she and her mother drove to Brody's home on July 4th, around 7:30 a.m. They found him washing his car, a 2009 Dodge Avenger. When Brody saw Kathy Jo, he rolled his eyes and said Megan left because she didn't want to live with her anymore and was on her way to be with her dad. Meanwhile, Police Chief Keith Kulklacher gets involved, talking to Megan's family and friends. He and his officers quickly learned about Brody too. Megan's friends revealed to police that she was obsessed with Brody, talking about him constantly since they started dating. However, when the police spoke to Brody, he claimed he and Megan were just friends. As soon as he heard about her disappearance, he started searching for her and drove around for a few hours. When he could not find Megan, he returned to his girlfriend Kendra's place, before heading home around 5 a.m. Asked why he could not be reached by phone during his search efforts, Brody explained that he had left his phone at Kendra's. The police continued their investigation and got access to Megan's phone data. They discovered that up until Megan's disappearance, she and Brody had been almost constantly texting each other. Literally, almost constantly. They would exchange about 150 messages per day. From the messages, it became clear that they did in fact had a sexual relationship and frequently discussed running away together. That did not match with what Brody had told police during his interview. Of course, Brody was brought in for questioning again. This time, he admitted they had indeed talked about running away, but claimed he changed his mind and tried to delay the plan, even attempting to discourage Megan. Police decided it is time to look deeper into Brody. When people start to change stories, well, that is never a good sign. When police examined Brody's Dodge Avenger, they found a red-brown stain on the trunk liner. It looked like a blood stain. Things did not look good for Brody. But tests came back negative. It wasn't blood. Brody seemed to be telling the truth, after all, and wasn't involved in Megan's disappearance. It was clear Megan had prepared to run away from home. She had spoken about it to Brody, ensured she had money, and even faked a stomachache to be brought home, knowing Kathy Jo would go back to help finish work at her friend's house. With no evidence against Brody or anyone else, the case went cold. Megan was classed as an endangered runaway. However, the Fairfield community refused to give up. The town immediately sprang into action when Megan went missing and continued their efforts over the years. They organized searches, held vigils, prayer circles, made wristbands and posters, and posted on social media to keep the case alive. Megan's face was everywhere. Even highway traffic signs and church marquees called attention to her. Fairfield never let the family down. In 2015, friends and family create a video for Megan here on YouTube, in hopes that she will see it. The message they wanted to send to Megan is that they missed her and that it was safe to come home. It's truly a beautiful and heartbreaking video at the same time. It's too long to include all of it here, but let's watch some of it. This video illustrates perfectly how very much loved Megan was, and how warm and loving the people around her were.
Hey Megs, it's Maddie. I'm really missing you. Church camp was real rough this year without you. Everything's been real rough.
Megan, I love you. And I miss your voice. I miss your hugs. I miss your laugh and your smile. I miss our friendship. I just miss my daughter so much.
I wanted to say that I love and miss you so much, and no matter what your circumstance is, you're always going to be welcome home with open arms. We're just a phone call away.
We love you. We miss you so much.
I'm at a loss for words. That's not something that usually happens. Someone knows something, and they're not saying it. Please help.
I know. This is tough to watch. Seeing all those people that love and miss their girl. I can tell you, it really got to me. Of course, I will link to the video in the description box. Despite all these efforts, Megan remained missing. On her 18th birthday, July 18, 2016, Kathy Jo had lost all hope. She believed that if Megan were still alive, she would have contacted her family or friends by now. And, as an adult, Megan could easily get back in touch without having to live with her family. In 2016, the FBI got involved in the case, but it took another year before there was a breakthrough. And sadly, not the one Megan's family and friends were hoping for. On December 26, 2017, human remains were found in a shallow grave in a remote wooded area, south of Boylston in Wayne County, not far from Megan's home. Jackie Beck and her partner Carl Vaughn discovered a skull and bones while preparing to cut firewood. Knowing the Nichols family, Carl immediately thought of Megan and called the police.
Well, I seen something shining there in the sun, and it was bright. I was coming from that way, and I just stopped and walked over there, and then I realized it was a skull.
The remains were taken to Bloomington, Illinois, for an autopsy, and then to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia, for identification. A month later, on January 26, 2018, the FBI confirmed that the remains were indeed Megan. It was believed that she never left the area, and her death was classified as a homicide. Family and friends now knew what had happened to Megan, but there was no closure. They needed justice for Megan. However, after Megan's death was classed as a homicide, the case seemingly went quiet again. Seemingly, because this story is not over yet. It gets pretty intense, for the lack of a better word. The discovery of Megan's body put Brody back under police scrutiny. During another interview with police, he admitted that 24 hours before Megan went missing, he had snuck into her bedroom without Kathy Jo knowing, of course. He had helped Megan pack and spent the night there. Brody changed another part of his story too, now saying he never actually looked for Megan on the night she disappeared. Instead, he wanted it to appear that way to distract police. According to Brody, Megan met someone who would help her get away in their car. He did not know who this person was. His part in the plan was just to distract the police from Megan, so she had a good chance to make it out of town and get well on her way. The police now strongly suspected Brody of murdering Megan, but they did not have enough evidence for a case. Actually, other than suspicions, the police had nothing. They have to let him go. So, Brody happily moves on with his life. He had moved to Evansville, Indiana, in early 2016 to start an exciting new chapter at the University of Southern Indiana, where he works towards a bachelor degree in geology. Brody shares an apartment with his best friend Kyle Ellis at 5037 Lakeside Court in Evansville, just a few minutes away from campus. Meanwhile, the FBI keeps working on the case. There are just too many red flags popping up around Brody. Investigators decide to take a second look at Brody's car. The samples of the stain in the trunk liner had come back negative for blood in 2014. The FBI investigators decide they want to collect new samples and retest those for blood and DNA. But Brody no longer owns the car. About a year earlier, in 2016, Brody had crashed his car into a tree. He sold the car to a salvage yard, which then sold it on to a couple in Missouri. Thankfully, the couple was very cooperative, and without asking for a warrant, they allowed the police to search the car and take the samples they needed. This time, the samples came back positive. Under the trunk liner, investigators found even more blood, and the DNA matched Megan's. Yes, back in 2014, the state troopers had failed to lift up the trunk liner. I know, small-town police, but come on. This is just ridiculous. They failed to lift up the trunk liner. I can't even begin to understand this. Quick side note. I am usually not including gossip in my videos, but Brody's father happened to be a state trooper. He had even worked for the Fairfield police and had been the partner of Police Chief Keith Colclasher. Till this day, rumors about a possible attempt for a cover-up are swirling around in Fairfield and on the internet. There is no evidence to support this, of course. So let's go back to the facts. Ray Hart, the FBI agent on the case, noted inconsistencies and red flags in Brody's story. For instance, on the morning after Megan vanished, while her mother and grandmother were frantically searching for her, they found Brody at home, washing his car at 7:30 a.m. on July 4th. Hart saw this as a massive red flag, given the circumstances. A then 18-year-old ex-boyfriend, washing his car in the early hours of a holiday, when his ex-girlfriend is missing. Yeah, pretty big red flag indeed. The FBI visited Brody in Indiana, but he declined to speak with them as advised by his father, the state trooper. The FBI then speaks to Brody's roommate and best friend, Kyle Ellis. Kyle was shaken to hear that his best friend was now a murder suspect. He had known Brody through and through. Or so he thought. Kyle revealed that in April 2014, Brody had made him a strange offer, wanting to give him all his belongings, guitars, video game consoles, and a motorcycle, in exchange for $3,000, saying he was sick of his family and wanted to run away. But Kyle didn't take him seriously. Brody could be quite dramatic, according to Kyle. The FBI asked Kyle to wear a wire and see if Brody would confess or incriminate himself. Kyle took a few days to process the information he had been given by the investigators. He concluded that Brody was indeed guilty. Kyle decided that his best friend was not the person he thought him to be, and decided to work with the FBI. Kyle does not want to live with Brody anymore and moves out of the apartment they share. He does stay in touch, of course. Kyle recorded 2 conversations with Brody. During the first visit, Brody didn't say anything incriminating. When Kyle returns for the second visit and brings up Megan again, Brody gets suspicious and even asks if he is wearing a wire. Kyle denies, but thinks Brody did not believe it and knew he was being recorded. I honestly don't understand how Kyle kept it together after this. I would probably panic and blow the whole operation. Would you be able to do it? I'd really like to know how you guys feel about this. Let me know in the comments. This should be interesting. Okay, back to the case. Despite his suspicions, Brody did talk and eventually made a very incriminating statement. Let's listen to some of what Kyle recorded and discuss afterwards.
What's new with you? Well, I moved. Brody, have I ever just asked you what happened that night? We did you see Megan? Can you how did?
Yeah. Okay. So I saw her whenever I dropped my iPod off. That was it.
That was it. Okay.
I had a pretty solid way of handling the whole situation with her, but she left before I could tell her mom.
You were going to tell her mom?
I was going to tell her mom as soon as she turned 16. But she was planning on running away.
Okay.
And then I got that chance.
Your old car.
Sorry.
And in the trunk of your car, they've taken a lot of different samples, and there's blood in the back of your car, and it's Megan's blood. Why is her blood in your car?
That's a good question. I would like to know that too.
You don't know how her blood got there?
Nope.
Why'd you leave your phone at Kendra's?
I honestly don't know. I didn't do it. That's what you asked.
You did not kill Megan.
I did not kill Megan. That makes me think that somebody with like anger issues found out about something, strangled her.
Okay, so Brody confirmed he saw Megan, but only to drop off his iPod. He also claims he was going to inform Kathy Jo about Megan's plan to run away, after Megan would have turned 16. Pretty strange to wait for a birthday to inform a mother about her daughter's plan to run away from home, but that is just my opinion. This guy. Anyway, Brody then basically does not answer Kyle's questions about the blood in his car and why he left his phone at his girlfriend's place when he went to search for Megan. But then, even though Kyle is almost convinced that Brody knows the conversation is being recorded, Brody starts to share his thoughts on what he thinks might have happened. He says, quote, "That makes me think that somebody with, like, anger issues found out about something and strangled her," unquote. While this comment wasn't a direct confession, it was pretty close, because the details about Megan's cause of death had not been made public, so only the murderer and the police knew Megan had been strangled and suffocated. Out of all the possible ways to kill someone, he could have picked literally anything. But no, Brody picks the correct one. What are the chances, huh? Of course, on its own, this would not be enough evidence for a conviction. But, in combination with the discovery of Megan's blood in Brody's car and the thousands of text messages between the two, investigators feel they have enough to present to a grand jury. On September 25, 2020, Brody, now 24 years old, was indicted by the grand jury for first-degree murder, concealment of homicidal death, and 2 counts of home invasion. He was arrested on October 7th when he arrived at his workplace in Evansville, Indiana.
Merbarger faces murder and other charges in connection with the death of Megan Nichols. Eyewitness News' Mike Pickett is in Fairfield with the latest on the case.
The man both Wayne County and federal authorities say is responsible for her disappearance and her death is now in custody.
Merbarger is being held in the Vanderburgh County Detention Center, awaiting extradition back to Illinois.
It took almost 2 more years, but Brody's trial finally started on October 3, 2022. In his testimony, Brody claimed that he had had sex with Megan when she was on her period, which is how her blood got on his t-shirt. Afterwards, he changed into a clean shirt and put the blood-stained one in his trunk. Brody explained that his trunk leaked water, causing the blood to spread throughout the trunk and under the liner. The jury was taken outside to see the car for themselves. Detectives explained where in the trunk the blood was found. His father, Jason Merbarger, the state trooper, confirmed the trunk's leaking in his testimony. Other than that, he claimed not to know about blood or other fluids in the trunk. Brody also claimed that his statements to his friend Kyle about Megan's death was not a confession, but simply a response to information Kyle mentioned. Right. Well, the jury did not stand for it. It took them just 2 hours of deliberation on October 13th to find Brody guilty on all counts. He faced a sentence of 20 to 60 years in prison. Attorney General Kwame Raoul said, quote, "I am pleased with the jury's decision and pray it brings some degree of healing to the family and friends of Megan Nichols," unquote. Brody, however, was not pleased and requested a new trial. A hearing was held on January 16, 2023. Among the reasons for his motion were the national media coverage, social media, and rumors. The defense claimed that Brody had already been tried and convicted for murder in the public eye before jury selection. His defense team also argued that the text messages read in court held no relevance to the case, serving only to bias the jury further. The state disagreed, arguing that the jury selection was properly handled by the judge and that 14 impartial jurors were selected. They also noted that only 30 out of the 7,500 text messages were used, and these were relevant to motive. Ultimately, Judge Michael Molt denied the defense's motion for acquittal or a new trial. The judge explained that he had considered appropriate case law before making his initial ruling and found no reason for a change of venue. And then, finally, on January 27, 2023,
breaking news out of Fairfield, Illinois tonight. The man convicted in the murder of Megan Nichols was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Brody Merbarger was found guilty of first-degree murder back in October for the 2014 murder of 15-year-old Megan Nichols in Fairfield.
He will be eligible for parole in 2070 when he is about 75 years old. Brody is currently incarcerated in Illinois. He did file a motion to reconsider his sentence in June 2023, but this too was denied by the judge. He has gone quiet since then. It is not known if he will appeal his conviction. I would not be surprised if he does, though. Megan was finally laid to rest in the cemetery at Cumberland Presbyterian Church in Fairfield during a private ceremony on February 2, 2023. A celebration of life was held a few days later. The family requested that on this day, Megan's life and the joy she brought to so many was celebrated. I can't even imagine the pain Megan's family and friends must have gone through. No parent should have to bury their child, let alone a child taken away in such a horrific manner. But I hope that the sentence and their faith will support them in finding peace, or as much peace as humanly possible. Thank you so much for listening to Megan's story. As always, I appreciate it that you take time out of your busy day to be here. These stories and the people they are about are important, and we should never forget them. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and please be safe. If you liked this video, please give it a like. It would be amazing if you subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you will not miss any of my videos. Alright, over and out. Bye.